Welcome to episode 22 of the You, Me, and BTC podcast. In today's show, we have two very informative interviews to share. First, we'll speak to Cy from an organization called Make Your Laws. He played a major role in requesting express permission from the FEC to collect Bitcoin donations for political campaigns and causes. We spoke about that decision a few weeks ago, but Cy is here to explain things in much more detail. Later in the show, we'll chat with one of our sponsors, Josh, the developer of Cannacoin. He'll tell us all about his altcoin and explain why the project is important to him. John's out of town this week, so your hosts for the next hour are just Tim Baker and myself, Daniel Brown. Here we go. Okay, so we are here today with Cy. He is the president of Make Your Laws, which is a pretty cool organization that kind of pushes for people to have more influence in politics and things like that. And they were kind of behind the recent decision that the FEC made to allow Bitcoin donations to political campaigns and things like that. Cy, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So yeah, can you just tell us about your project and about your process that you had to go through with this whole Bitcoin thing? What did you have to do? Just tell us your story.
Sure. So overall, for Make Your Laws, it's a project to ultimately transform legislatures into liquid democracy. Practically speaking, the first step towards that goal is to democratize campaign finance. So what we're doing first, and what's going to be on our website hopefully very soon, you can sign in and get an invite for the beta when it's released, is you'll be able to do basically one-stop shopping for all your political contributions. We are 100% strictly nonpartisan. So you'd be able to go to our site and contribute easily to pretty much anyone. And then we'd also be adding other features to that, like the ability to contribute based on the recommendations of other people that you trust, or the ability to do Kickstarter type contributions for small up-and-coming candidates or propositions that are trying to get it off the ground. Things like that. Eventually, you'd be able to sign propositions and get them on the ballot all on our site, etc. And that's sort of more in the future. And I've been talking at conferences about Make Your Laws, and some of those are hacker conferences. So naturally, the question came up to me more than a year ago: can we contribute to you with Bitcoin? Because it's hackers; they're going to want to be able to do that. So I thought that was an interesting question. I was already familiar with Bitcoin technically. I don't have more than like a tenth of a Bitcoin myself, but I had used it before, and so I'm familiar with it. And because I'm responsible for Make Your Laws PAC, following all the federal campaign finance laws and so forth, I'm personally responsible. I can be held liable if we screw up. That also means I've been researching campaign finance law, and I thought it was a really interesting question. So we had planned on submitting what's called an advisory opinion request to the Federal Election Commission. So it's AOR and FEC, if you hear me say that, sometime in the future. And the process for doing that is actually more or less straightforward, and the FEC is actually quite good about communicating with potential requesters and helping guide that process. So I actually have to give them kudos for being as open as I've ever seen a government agency be. So what you do is basically you have to be an entity capable of doing what you want to ask about. So you're not allowed to ask hypothetical questions. You're not allowed to ask questions about third parties' behavior. and so forth. But what you are allowed to ask is one kind of question, which is, can we do X? So, like I said, I was going to have us submit a question about can we accept Bitcoin contributions at some point, but it wasn't going to be our first thing. Our first thing was going to be flexible earmarking, which you can read up about at makerlaws.org/FEC/earmarks. And we can talk about that more later if you're interested. But late last year, a different group called Conservative Action Fund PAC, which is run by a lawyer named Dan Backer, who also represented, for instance, Sean McCutcheon in McCutcheon versus FEC, which he recently won, which overturned the biennial contribution limit. He represented the Tea Party Leadership Fund in asking to be excluded from having to report the names of their donors. I don't recall which cases exactly, but he was involved in some of the series of cases, Citizens United, Speech Now, etc., sort of that whole series of things. Anyway, so he submitted a request on behalf of Conservative Action Fund PAC, asking for them to be allowed to accept Bitcoin. The request, unfortunately, had a bunch of loopholes in it. Ones that the FEC didn't notice when they were writing their first draft response. And so we commented on the request to point out the various issues with it that would have to be addressed to have policy that was consistent with sort of the spirit of federal election law, which is that it's supposed to be transparent. You need to know who your donors are. You need to be able to audit it in case something goes wrong. It needs to have some reasonable limits to, if not perfectly prevent, because that's not possible, but to deter and limit unlawful contributions and so forth. And the request and the draft just didn't really address those issues. So we commented on it, so making proposals for how they could address it better, how, if they were going to say yes to the request, and parts of it we did support, how they could do so in a way that would fix the holes. The commission, which is composed of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, or I should say 3 appointees from each party. One of the Democratic commissioners is actually a registered nonpartisan. They deadlocked 3-3 on Conservative Action Fund, or CAF, on CAF's request. The 3 Republican commissioners voting in favor and the 3 Democratic commissioners voting against. In the wake of that, and also actually during that, there have been committees, which you can view on makerlaws.org/FEC/Bitcoin/PACS, PACS, that have been accepting Bitcoin anyway. So a deadlock is not a denial. It just means that the commission couldn't reach an answer. It doesn't mean that it's legal. It doesn't mean that it's illegal. It just means that they couldn't answer your question. So they went about accepting Bitcoins anyway. The Libertarian Party has been doing so. Mr. Backer created a new super PAC called BitPAC, which has been accepting Bitcoins and supporting one of the candidates that some of his other PACs support, and so forth. Anyway, so this has all been in a legal gray area up until May 9th when the decision, our request came out, because the commission had never really answered, can you accept Bitcoins? And if so, how? Like, what are the requirements? How do you have to account for them? Are there limits? Anything like that? They just hadn't answered. And so we submitted a request early this year asking sort of similar questions to what CAF had. But in our request, there was a pretty detailed explanation, and you can read it yourself at makerlaws.org/FEC/Bitcoin/AOR, advisory opinion request. And I think it's on pages 7 to 9. And it just details saying, we're not going to mine for Bitcoins. We're going to value them at the time of the contribution. We are not going to publish a Bitcoin address. We're only going to give people one-time per transaction addresses and only give them that after they have given us the identification information that's required by law, which is your name, your mailing address, your occupation, and your employer. That we would not accept Bitcoins valued at more than $100 per contributor per election per recipient, and that we track various Bitcoin-specific stuff like the transaction number, the receiving address, etc., etc. And we also asked that we be allowed to purchase and sell Bitcoin, that we be allowed to pay Bitcoin miners transaction fees in Bitcoin, because you kind of have to do that to be able to transact in Bitcoin, and that we be allowed to disperse Bitcoin directly to pay for various relatively low sensitivity kinds of things like salaries or goods and services, website hosting, things like that, but not for advertisements or political contributions, or the kinds of more sensitive expenditures that need to be more transparent. The commission took a little while to deliberate on it, and eventually they came down with a unanimous decision in favor of the majority of our requests, finding that we can accept contributions in the way that we described. We can hold Bitcoin in a Bitcoin wallet if it's been contributed to us or if we purchase it. That what we said was fine as far as valuation. For refunds, it's fine that we are refusing absolutely to give any refunds ever in Bitcoin, only in US dollars. Like, if we need to give you a refund, then we will cut you a check to the mailing address. They said we could not use Bitcoins that we purchased for disbursement for goods and services. They deadlocked on whether we could do so with Bitcoins that had been given to us and not liquidated. And they also deadlocked on whether the $100 limit that we proposed was mandatory or not. And the commissioners came out with opposing statements of opinion on that, which are not binding, but are sort of their individual opinions on that issue. However, because the way that a request works is it says, may we do X, that doesn't mean that other committees are required to do X. It doesn't mean that just because we said, may we accept up to $100, it doesn't mean that the Republican commissioners who did not necessarily support a limit of that sort, that they're saying yes to our request, said yes to the limit being mandatory. And they just didn't express an opinion either way on the limit. And I'm sure some other committee will come along and litigate that. You might be wondering why $100, and the answer is that's the limit that's already imposed in the law. I believe it's 11 CFR 110.4C for contributions. I forget what it is for petty cash disbursements. And basically, if you have a contribution of actual physical cash, like US dollar bills, and you do know who it's from, so you have contributor information, it is limited to $100. If they want to give you more than that, then they have to do so via currency or in-kind contribution, but it can't be cash. And our reasoning was that congressional intent of that was to limit the flow of contributions that are hard to trace or expenditures that are hard to trace. Because, a literal suitcase of cash showing up at a committee's doorstep is unseemly at best, even if it comes with a list of all the people it represents, or the one person that it represents, potentially. So that's why we had that. I think that's the major highlight. So, back to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, definitely sounds like quite the process and a lot of decision making and regulation and things like that. And even though I mean, I think our listeners will know, especially from our episode, a couple episodes ago when we talked about this, we don't necessarily see any reason personally that we would care too much about elections or politicians or things like that, but, I think we still owe you a bit of a thank you just for, in general, even though it's not necessarily for us or anything, it's still another way to use Bitcoin, and it's another way that is expressly allowed, at least in some ways and in some cases and things like that. Even if it's only a little bit, it's just, one way that I guess it's just helpful for Bitcoin because it's, at least in some ways, it's approved and accepted for this and or whatever. So,
and the IRS and FinCEN have been taking also, I think, a pretty reasonable regulatory stance from the point of view of Bitcoin proponents. Obviously, they're not taking the stance that some proponents might prefer of it being entirely unregulated and entirely untaxed and so forth. And I'm not going to comment on that because we're nonpartisan. Those are partisan questions. But as for helping Bitcoin as a market, again, this is not really pertinent to the mission of Make Your Laws, but I think it does help Bitcoin if it has more avenues for use where it's actually being used as a medium of exchange and not strictly for financial speculation. That can only increase the stability of Bitcoin as a market. As to your previous point of being perhaps disinterested in elections, I understand that you're coming from a libertarian or anarchist point of view, and that, again, I can't comment on because we're nonpartisan. However, I would suggest that even if you disagree with the current system, or if you would want not just to change the rules that we have, but to remove some of them, that's still an interest in making your laws. And Make Your Laws is set up to help you do that, whatever your perspective is. We're strictly neutral. And I think that a lot of the attitude around that stems from a currently not too far off from correct view that you don't really have the influence to truly make your laws. And that's what we would like to fix. As to what you want your laws to be, that's for you and everyone else in your jurisdiction to decide together. That's not for us to sort of nudge. But I think giving you the ability to do that is still something that you would be interested, libertarian or capitalist, anarchist or statist, regardless of what your position is. I think you're still going to want to have influence over what the laws are that you are governed by.
It's nice. I mean, no matter how much, like even just a little bit of a leveling of the playing field is always nice to be able to, and just the kind of, I guess, pushing more towards transparency of money in politics. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin for this, like for the donations, did that come out of you kind of you thinking Bitcoin was good from it, or was it mostly, like you did mention about going to hacker conventions, was it mostly just because of you saw interest from other people?
Well, originally, when I said we were going to make this request, it wasn't going to be our highest priority, but we were going to anyway. That was just a customer service thing. For us, it will be just another means of payment. You'll be able to pay us using credit card or check or Bitcoin or whatever else, possibly PayPal or Amazon or Google Wallet or whatever. And from that perspective, it's just a purely practical thing. It's not because we have a position on Bitcoin one way or another. It's just, people want to pay us with Bitcoin. Sure. We're happy to do that as long as it complies with the law. Yeah. The transparency angle is, however, a actual objective for making laws. And when we saw that CAS request sort of had significant problems from that perspective, we kind of had to respond and then turn around and propose something that we thought was a good, workable system that that would be usable, that would comply fully with the law, that would provide as much transparency as is possible to reasonably provide while still deterring unlawful use. And that is something that we have as a goal. So that, of course, would have been the case anyway with our request, but that was the motivation for our responding to CAF's request and to making the request a higher priority to do now rather than at some point in the future, because we wanted to clarify the rules, or I should correct that. It's not a rule, but clarify what political committees are allowed to do and say, look, if you do it this way, you're in the clear. You don't necessarily have to do it this way, but if you want to do it a different way, you're going to have to ask the FEC for yourself, and you won't be protected by our opinion. But if you do it this way, then you're good. And I think that provides some more certainty to committees that might otherwise be leery of accepting Bitcoin because they're just more legally conservative. As are we. I mean, I don't want to get fined by the FEC. So it provides certainty, and it says, look, if you do it like this, you're fine. It doesn't answer everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't do everything that we would have liked. We would like to be allowed to disperse Bitcoin to pay for goods and services or salaries or so forth. They deadlocked on that. They didn't say no. We're probably not going to sue them over that because it's just not important enough for us. But it would have been nice. But it's a good step, and I'm sure there's going to be future requests that address some of the finer points in more detail, and I'm sure that sooner or later the $100 question is going to get litigated, not by us, but someone's going to do it.
You mentioned a bit ago that it is kind of, originally at least, it was just kind of a customer service thing and a way to accept a payment. And that's kind of an important part for anybody that wants to participate in this. Then, yeah, it's just going to be a way for them to make a payment in Bitcoins to a politician or a cause or whatever. Can you just tell us how that would go down, how we would make a donation and how it all works?
Yeah, like I said, that's currently under development. If you sign up now, you'll get a beta invite, and hopefully it'll deploy soon. I'm working on the code. But what you'll see is basically you'll be able to easily search for basically any political recipient. So that's political candidate committees, parties, PACs, super PACs, etc. Starting at the federal level, but then expanding to state level ones as well, and also expanding to what are called 501c4 organizations, also known as issue advocacy or social welfare, which means things like yes on Prop X, no on Prop X, ACLU, NRA, NOM, etc. All of those are sort of 501c4 type organizations that do lobbying, stuff like that. So those would also be listed on our website at some point. They're not going to be version 1, but version 1.1 maybe. And you pick whatever you want to contribute to. You add it to your cart. You go to checkout. There's going to be a line in your cart that is added sort of like Humble Bundle does, which is a contribution to make your laws, which we set by default and you can change. You wouldn't be able to change it lower than our actual process your transaction because we're not going to take a loss. But you'd be able to set it at whatever level you want. You say how much total you want to contribute, how you want to distribute that among the items in your cart, and then you pay, either with Bitcoin or with credit card or with whatever other payment processors that we use. If it's more than $100 per recipient, then the excess would have to be paid with credit card or something like that. Or you'd have to split it into two separate payments. And that's pretty much it. You enter in your donor info that we're required to collect by law. If you wanted to pay by Bitcoin, you enter your info. After you set your cart, there'd be a pay with Bitcoin button, or just right alongside pay with credit card or whatever else. Click it. It'll show you a one-time address that is assigned for that transaction and unique to that transaction. You send your Bitcoins to that address. It gets immediately converted to US dollars on our side through BitPay or Coinbase or whoever we use. once we have that confirmed by our processor and locked down, then we show it as having been paid and how much was paid exactly. And within 10 days of receiving that, then we disperse it via normal means to the recipient. So that's check or ACH or things like that. So pretty straightforward, and it'll only get more interesting from there. That's just the simplest version. Later on, you'll be able to do some more power tool type stuff that I mentioned earlier.
So the $100 limit pertains to one person or one cause, or I guess this would make the question would make more sense if we're talking about
per recipient.
Okay.
So if you're one contributor, so you're one person, that's that part, per election. So federal law distinguishes primary elections, general elections, special elections, and so forth. And then per recipient, so that could be a candidate committee, a PAC, any of the federal level entities, us, for instance. So per line item, basically, in your card. Each line item can't be more than $100.
Okay. So, who all can we or will we be able to donate to? And is it just, so far all you've talked about is federal?
I said we start with federal, but expand to state and local as soon as we're able. That's just a matter of basically compliance issues. To operate at the local level or the state level, we have to also obey federal laws. To operate in a state like California, for instance, just to pick one of the large ones, they require us to report electronically, just like the FEC would require us to report. They have their own custom format. We need the software to report in that automatically and so forth. There's registration requirements with each state that are different for each state, etc. So it's just a pragmatic issue of making sure we're obeying the laws and regulations of every single state. But the idea is you'll be able to contribute to every political entity in the United States, absolutely every single one. It might take us a little while to get them all listed and make sure we're in compliance with all the state laws and all the county laws and all the city laws and every single jurisdiction. It'll take some time, but that's what we're going to do.
I mean, do you have any kind of a timeline for that, or is that really just not?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I aim to have the site up and running at a basic level at least within about a month for normal federal recipients. So that means, from our point of view, they're more or less all identical. They have different contribution limits, but that's about it. So that means candidate committees, federal parties, PACs, super PACs, which are a kind of PAC. That's the major ones. There's a couple special cases that we're not addressing right now that aren't high priority, like things called separate segregated funds. Like Google has a PAC called Google PAC, and right now federal regulations say that if you are not a member of Google, their restricted class, they are not allowed to solicit you for money. They are allowed to, if you just randomly send them a check, they're allowed to take your money. They are not allowed to tell you that they are allowed to take your money because that would constitute a solicitation. So one of the questions that we probably will ask the FEC in the future is whether we're allowed to tell you that they're allowed to take your money and earmark it for you. So we would want to list Google PAC or whoever PAC. We don't really care. Just alongside equally everyone else. It's not that we're going to be coordinating with any of them or prioritizing them in any way. They're treated equally. We just want to list everyone. But that would require another advisory opinion request, and it's not the highest priority thing. So that's not going to be on the first round of stuff. And then if you want to contribute to issue advocacy organizations, that would probably go ultimately through Make Your Laws Advocacy Incorporated, which is a 501c4, which is the more appropriate sort of legal corporate vehicle to do that through. which again just adds different regulatory compliance issues. So it's just a matter of making sure we're compliant with everything, registered everywhere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, the idea is everyone. Absolutely every political entity.
You just said issue advocacy groups, right?
Yes.
Would there still be that $100 limit? Because how could you tell?
For 501c4s, no.
No.
If you're contributing to Make Your Laws Advocacy Incorporated and not to Make Your Laws PAC Incorporated, Make Your Laws PAC is a FEC registered hybrid super PAC. And the law that I referred to that we were using by analogy for the $100 limit is a law that only applies to contributions to political committees in the federal Senate. It does not apply to issue advocacy groups. In fact, hardly anything in the Federal Election Campaign Act applies to issue advocacy groups. The few things that do are that if you are airing ads that are too close to the line, that they might influence elections because they're issue ads, they name someone, you have to report things like that. And what else? If you're contributing money, which is currently legal and kind of a large loophole in federal law that the IRS is considering closing. If you contribute money to a super PAC, which you are allowed to do with a minority of the funds, then that can't come from a foreign national source because foreign nationals are prohibited from directly or indirectly contributing to or affecting the election of a politician in the United States. So, for instance, there were decisions by the FEC a while ago on some propositions. I don't recall where. I think it might have been California, where they were sort of de facto part of the governor's political campaign because they were backed officially by the governor and they were sort of part of his election strategy and so forth. So they said that those things a foreign national can't contribute to. However, for almost everything else, if it's strictly issue advocacy, it doesn't talk about politicians, it doesn't do it doesn't give money to a PAC or anything like that, then as far as I'm aware, and I am not your lawyer, this is not legal advice, but as far as I'm aware, it is perfectly legal for such organizations to accept completely anonymous contributions in unlimited amounts from anyone, including foreign nationals, to do issue advocacy. And even the ACLU has defended that actually when they opposed the Disclose Act in Congress. They wrote a white paper explaining why they defended the anonymity of contributions to issue advocacy only organizations. So because you can contribute in unlimited amounts anonymously to an issue advocacy organization for issue advocacy only purposes, then if that's what you were doing, there wouldn't be a $100 cap.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think these regulations, do they apply to altcoins as well, or is that something that you would have to go after again?
I think that, so the standard caveat that the FEC gives on every advisory opinion, and you can read it on the AO 2014-02, which was our advisory opinion that they gave unanimously, allowing us to accept Bitcoins. If you look at the end of that opinion, there's a standard chunk that they put in every single opinion, which says that, I'm summarizing from the top of my head here, that other committees or entities that intend to engage in actions that are materially indistinguishable from the actions described in the request are also protected by the opinion. So
Okay.
the opinion says to us, the FEC will not prosecute us for doing what we asked to do.
Mm-hmm.
They said, yes, you are okay with doing that, and we're allowed to legally rely on that, and they cannot tell us later, like, oh, psych, like, just kidding, we're going to prosecute you. So we're protected. And so is any other committee that does the exact same thing. And the key phrase there would be, what is distinguishable? I would guess, though, again, this is a legal question, and I'm not your lawyer, this is not legal advice, that altcoins are covered equally under this request, so long as they meet the criteria that were sort of important to this one. So, for instance, there has to be a large, high-volume marketplace where it's clear what the value of it is at any one time. It has to be possible to have transaction IDs, and it has to be possible to have one-time addresses and things like that. But to my understanding, and I don't know most altcoins as well as I know Bitcoin, but to my understanding, most altcoins would probably qualify for that if they are big enough to have a substantial marketplace. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't apply to them. If you wanted to have certainty, then your pack, or potentially ours, if you want us to. And there's, if someone comes to me and says, I represent a group of like 1,000 Dogecoin users, and we all want to give you contributions of $100 worth of Dogecoin, if you will clarify whether that's allowed. That's fine. I'll do it. I picked Bitcoin just because it's the big one. And I'm pretty sure that it would apply identically to Dogecoin, and that would be a cut and dry, simple decision for the FEC to make. I would probably ask first, because like I said, I'm fairly legally conservative. I don't want us to be doing things that are at all like in a gray area, because frankly, it's my ass on the line. But yeah, my expectation is they would say, yeah, that's basically the same thing as you asked us before. Sure, whatever. Same as before. But unless someone specifically asks, it won't be specifically answered.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, that makes sense, and I think hopefully we can see some, maybe some altcoin contributions or something like that going down somewhere. That'd be pretty cool.
Sure.
Well, yeah, just before we let you go, is there any way that people can contact you, or anything they should look up, or any way they should be able to follow you or anything like that?
Sure. If you go to makeyourlaws.org, for one, click sign up and make an account, and you'll get a beta invite as soon as we launch. Before we officially launch, you'll get a beta invite. So that'll be sort of a quiet launch first, and then a public launch. You can contact us on Google+, which is linked from makeyourlaws.org, or google.com/makeyourlaws. That's the main place that we post stuff. It's on Twitter @makeyourlaws, Facebook /makeyourlaws. If you want to contact me personally, my email is sai@makeyourlaws.org. That's spelled SAI. And if you want to contribute to say thank you, that would be awesome. We will accept your Bitcoin contributions up to $100 worth as soon as the site is up. So go make the account, and we'll let you know when you can do that.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, hey, Sai from Make Your Laws, thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thank you. And thanks for, reaching out to us after our 20th episode.
You're absolutely welcome. I've got a Google alert set up to let me know when people post articles, and I try to help contribute with corrections or comments where I can.
You know those VPN sites where they advertise privacy? Why pay for a VPN when you can have a full root access Linux server? You can even turn your VPS into a VPN if you wanted to. A VPS is basically a virtualized server that you have complete control over. You can reinstall, reboot, or start your server instantly from the control panel. Prices start at just $7 a month, and of course we wouldn't even be talking about these guys if they didn't accept Bitcoin. If this sounds good to you, check out www.vertvps.com right now. Just select BitPay at checkout. To get you started, use coupon code UMeAndBTC for 50% off your first month's invoice. The website again is vertvps.com. Okay, so we are here today with Josh, also known as Subcreative online sometimes. He is the creator of Cannacoin, which is an altcoin. He was actually here. He joined us for our virtual meetup show that we had just last week, actually. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, I'll just start with the pretty basic, most obvious question. Tell us about Cannacoin. Tell us how it started, where the idea came from, what your vision is, and tell us all about it.
Sure. I'll give you guys a little bit of background on my history here. So first of all, I'm from Seattle, Washington. So many people know that Seattle and Colorado, or Washington State and Colorado, are the leaders right now in the movement for legalization. I also co-own and run NorthwestGreenThumb.com, which is a online medical marijuana forum or community for medical patients here in Washington State. We spawned that website about 5 years ago, and now it's become a staple resource for medical patients and cannabis users and supporters, not only in Washington State, but really worldwide. So after the birth of Northwest Green Thumb, and just kind of watching it grow and seeing the legalization movement pan out here in Washington State, last year we passed the recreational law for cannabis, and also Colorado did the same thing. And one of the first things we saw happen come out of that movement was that there was no banking system or no ability for these businesses that were starting up in this new industry to really get reliable banking. So the idea really was just it really made sense watching the whole birth of Bitcoin and seeing how that's changed the world and how it's changing money and the way people are transacting. And it just only seemed right that we needed a dedicated, specific currency for this movement and this industry that was growing at a rapid pace. So I first got involved in Bitcoin around 2012, and I witnessed all of the ups and downs throughout that period, and also the birth of some of the altcoin boom, really. And I saw some industry-specific coins during that period, and that's really what spawned the ideas. What I was seeing that, you know what, maybe there might be a car coin in the future for the car industry. There might be, there was the sex coin, and there was other industry-specific coins. And I thought, well, if you could create a coin for an industry, then you could grow the economy of that industry without the impacts or implications of the oil industry or governments or other people or outside influences that wanted to get their hands on cannabis in general. So that's kind of where the idea spawned.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you know, as an industry-specific coin and everything, I know you're still fairly young. Are there any cannabis operations or anything that actually use it yet, or are you still getting there?
We're still kind of in our infancy. I recently made a trip out to Colorado last month. I drove 20 plus hours to be out at the hemp fest that they were hosting there in Colorado. It was an amazing event, and it was a good opportunity to get in touch with some industry leaders, really. So we've made a lot of connections from that event, and also going forward, we've been talking to some other businesses that kind of have been contacting us on the side. We don't have any current organizations or businesses that are accepting it like as a form of full payment for their stores, but I myself am currently accepting it for some vaporizers and some glassware and some other things. So it's rolling out, and I have people that are interested in accepting it. It's just a matter of creating the merchant solutions for those businesses and vendors. So I'm working on a point of sale system and things like that will help ease that merchant processing ability for them.
Can you tell us about the coin specs for Cannacoin? Like the block time and the mining algorithms?
Sure. So we have chosen to use the script-based algorithm just because it's obviously the most widely accepted algorithm amongst altcoins, and most miners have the ability to mine with GPUs and CG Miner for script. So that was our first initial choice, was script. Now the block rewards and halving schedule and the total supply, we looked at Bitcoin and Litecoin in particular when designing this coin. I know there's a lot of altcoins to pull from, but we really feel that Bitcoin and Litecoin are two currencies that have gotten a lot of things right. So we tried to pull the best of both worlds from those two. So we looked at the current scope of altcoins and just seeing that one of the trends that we're seeing is a large supply of coins, and that large supply is kind of deflating some of these currencies and making them not worth very much. So the first initial thing was we wanted to limit the supply of the currency so that it wasn't easily deflated. So the way we did that was we looked at, well, what is currently successful with the supply and the rewards of Bitcoin? It's scarce. Obviously, that's one of the first properties the coin needs to have to hold value. So we realized that, well, Bitcoin was producing 25 coins every 10 minutes. So we wouldn't want to create more than 25 coins per block. So what we did was we halved that rate from the initial start to 12.5. And we increased the block time 10 times from Bitcoin. So it's actually only 1 minute block times instead of 10-minute block times. So in reality, at the end of that 10-minute period, you end up with 125 Cannacoins to Bitcoin's 25. So really there's about 5 times the rate at which Cannacoins are generated over Bitcoin. And to help with that supply so that we don't eventually become an inflationary currency is that we introduced a yearly halving schedule into the protocol. So every year the miners that are mining the coin can expect around or on March 28th that the coin is going to halve and the rate will be reduced. And in the end, that's going to lead us to having a 13,140,000 total supply, which is somewhat around half of Bitcoin's, a little bit more. But we feel that that will create enough reward and enough supply to supply the industry. And then it could always be fractionalized as far as payments if that becomes a problem. There's not so much friction there. But like I said, it creates an intrinsic value, some value because the coin is not deflated by an oversupply. And also it leads to about a 5 to 7 year rollout period for the currency in total. So after about 7 years, we should have pretty much all of the supply in circulation for the industry to use.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Sounds like there was definitely some thought put into organizing all this and thinking about how it might work best. And
Right. And one thing we tried to realize when coming up with everything is that it's not the new global currency. We're not trying to be a Bitcoin. We're not trying to be a Litecoin. We're trying to be an industry specific currency. And one of the thoughts was, why would we create more supply or try to really create a bigger coin than Bitcoin when we don't expect to capture the full audience of Bitcoin, where our demographic is more limited. So we realize that the supply can't be greater and it can't be produced at a rate at which it will deflate the current supply at the time.
yeah, that's pretty awesome, and that makes a lot of sense, and it's really cool. Just that's kind of what altcoins are for in general, is just try something new and see how it goes and everything.
Right. It's a lot of an experimentation, but I feel like I've had enough time in the altcoin world. I've done enough trading and mining to kind of get a feel for what I like personally and what I feel might be the best fit. And I've tried to pull from the best of both worlds, like I say all the time, but from Bitcoin and Litecoin, because those two really hold value. They've done pretty well. And so we just kind of try to look towards them as the future, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you tell us where you kind of stand in the development of the coin? Like, I know we already said you're kind of in your infancy, like just, how many exchanges do you have, and, block explorers, anything like that? Where do you kind of stand in all of that?
Sure. So on the launch of the coin, we had Block Explorer available. We have the official one at cannacoin.cc. We also have paper wallets. We have an IRC tip bot, which does some market rates for SwissX. SwissX is the current exchange that we're on. It's the only exchange that we're currently on, but I do have announcements here coming soon, and I guess I could say it here, but we're working with Bittrex, and we should be listed on Bittrex within the next week or so. So we'll be up to 2 exchanges there. Like I said, we had the Explorer, the paper wallets, the IRC tip bot. We also have a Reddit tip bot. And then we also have a number of other projects that are on our GitHub repository. We've created a Node.js implementation of Cannacoin for any of those Node programmers out there, or JavaScript programmers that want to create Node applications using Cannacoin. But really, that's all we have as far as the services. They're all officially run through the Cannacoin website. Through me, I host all the services myself. We're always looking for others that want to host block explorers or things of that nature, just so that we're not relying on one centralized source for information, and that other people can verify transactions amongst 2 different blockchains and whatnot. But as far as development goes, we really have a lot of tools out there, and we're always working to bring new things to the table. And one of those things we're doing recently is we're updating our client. We've had a couple of minor updates to our client since we've launched. But this next update we're working on, we're patching the wallet and the protocol to fall in line with the newest version of Litecoin, which will patch for OpenSSL and really bring us up to date as far as the client specs and the protocol standards, and whatnot. So I'm really excited about that. We got a lot of things, a lot of projects that we're working on currently.
You said, Josh, that you had some time where you were mining some of the altcoins. What are your thoughts on altcoins in general, or like what altcoins do you like?
In general, my consensus is that altcoins are here to stay. They are going to be part of this revolution. They're not going away. It's just like the idea of Bitcoin. Once it starts, it's an idea and you can't take that away. So I really do expect in the next couple of years that you'll see a continuance to surge in the altcoin world. As far as altcoins that I'm looking at or that I like, I really don't have any, to be honest, right now. I know there's some interesting coins out in the space like Darkcoin and whatnot, but really I think I'm more so interested and some other projects like Ethereum or the open contracts and things of that nature. There's slight innovation and things happening in the altcoin space, but really my time is so full and wrapped up in Cannacoin that I don't have time to mine these other coins or really get in deep into the inner workings and really get a feel for how this might be used and how I could use it. So, as of late, I haven't been paying too much to the alt cryptocurrency realm, you could say.
What are your thoughts on other, I guess you could call them competing coins, or just other coins that have like they're kind of related to I mean, not kind of, they are related to marijuana or cannabis. Sure. Like Potcoin.
Right. So one of the biggest reasons we did start Cannacoin, well, it's not out of spite or anything like that. We actually had the idea about a year ago. We've been sitting on maybe how we were going to approach it. And really at the time, I didn't have the know-how necessarily how to create my own Genesis block and all of those details. Now, I mean, I'm much more aware and educated, but some of those other coins like Dopecoin, Hempcoin, THC coin, like you mentioned, Potcoin, I really feel, a lot of those are dead already. The only one I would say that really might be alive is Potcoin. And there's a lot of things that I find wrong with those protocols. And that's a major reason why I didn't, just go ahead and promote my energy and time into something like Potcoin, is because there's a lot of things wrong with it. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Earlier I mentioned oversupply of coins being a common trend in altcoins. And, with Potcoin, there's a total supply of 420 million coins. They also produce 420 coins per block. They have 40-second block times. And originally when it launched, I think it was 4.2 years that the halving rate would happen. So everything was really gimmicky to me. There was no thought into the protocol. It seemed more like a marketing gimmick than it really seemed like a new cryptocurrency or economic protocol or whatever you want to call it. So realistically, there's other alternatives out there, like you said, but I really don't feel that they have the necessary protocol in place. It's really, there's a lot of flawed protocols out there that I feel like, there's nothing you can do to fix that after you've already generated it and created it and gave it out to the people and people are mining blocks. I mean, you can only change things over time, but really you can't fix something that was already broken from the start. So that's one of the reasons why we decided to launch Cannacoin without, like I said, promoting any energy into the other coins that I might have believed in. I guess you could just say I just really didn't believe in any of the other ones. Not only that, I think one thing that is important for the cannabis industry is that it seems only natural that a coin like Cannacoin would spawn from Colorado or Washington State, where the legalization movement is really at the forefront. And that's where it seems like it would only be natural for the coin to spawn. We have a lot of the industry already in place. We have some of the regulation already in place. And really it might be a bigger challenge to try to do something like this, say in Florida or Texas or somewhere else, trying to get out there and reach out to your community and say, hey, we're from, we're the forefront of the movement. We have not only medical marijuana here in Washington, we have recreational marijuana, and we have now this new innovation of a cryptocurrency for this industry. There's already the foundation is already here in place for us to incorporate that into. And so it makes it so that we don't have to create a lot of the infrastructure. It's already there in place.
Yeah, I think it's great. On our show, we always try to promote altcoins in general as a form of currency competition. I think we touched on this at our meetup. And, I don't follow too many altcoins. I don't keep an eye on too much, but we still generally like to say that it's good to have currency competition. And that's still the case even in an industry specific coin. Why not have competition? See which one's better, try out different things, see where it can go, and let the market kind of.
Exactly. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I feel that's sort of kind of what we're trying to do right now against Potcoin is I don't have any negative connotations towards the developers or anybody behind that movement. I truly feel that the protocol is flawed. It's not necessarily the community. So we do want to give people these alternatives and be like, and tell them, what is best for your situation? What do you get the most value out of? I think that's one thing just to note is that we're not talking about money anymore. When it comes to cryptocurrencies, money is irrelevant. It's about the shared value that you get between the two parties that are transacting. Is it going to be beneficial for you? And is it going to be beneficial for me? And if it's not, then we need to find a better alternative that's either cheaper, faster, more efficient, or that benefits us better. So I agree.
Hey, Josh, before we let you go, one thing that we like to do with as many as our guests as we can is just kind of ask them to tell us a personal story about their history in Bitcoin and, probably not how you got into the cryptocurrency space, because that's what a lot of people want to know. But I don't know if you ever saw how cryptocurrency can change the world, if you saw that firsthand, or if you ever scammed, if you have any funny stories like that, if you ever met anyone awesome. You have any personal stories for us?
I've seen cryptocurrencies just changing the space around me. I don't know if there's any really in particular any significant story other than the amazing things I see come out of some of the communities, like these crowdfunded campaigns to support organizations or whatnot. I've seen the movement of cryptocurrency just evolving and it's really consuming a lot of the people around me and it's helping them. I don't know, it's changing a lot of minds and really helping free a lot of people that I know. A lot of people have been stuck in the corporate world for the last 10 plus years, slaving away, not really knowing what it is that they want to do in life. And I feel that I'm seeing a lot of people around me just get introduced to the idea of cryptocurrency. And now, you're seeing a lot of full-timers that are really seeing the potential for it. And they're changing their lives for the better by introducing this new technology and making it their own. I feel like Bitcoin really it works for you as long as you're able to contribute back in some fashion. You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be a tech scientist or anything like that. As long as you're playing your position and contributing, it feeds back to you. So I'm seeing a lot of people just break the old cycle, I guess you could say, and transitioning into this new Bitcoin economy. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah. Okay, well, Josh, how can people follow and contact you to keep up with Cannacoin? And then you said a while ago that you were accepting Cannacoin for some vaporizers and glassware. Where can they go to check out what you have?
Sure. So you guys can find out more information about the project at cannacoin.cc. We also have a GitHub at cannacoin-project. You can follow us on Twitter at CCN Project, on Reddit r/Cannacoin. And if you guys want to find out more about the vaporizers, I have a post on our subreddit. But if you want to contact me directly, you can email me at josh@cannacoin.cc. They're just simple vaporizers. I just want to get the community something out there for people to purchase with those coins they've mined and whatnot. So I should have some more details on the official website, maybe with a link or something here soon.
Awesome. Hey, Josh, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. I really appreciate it. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Thanks for listening to episode 22. All of the music in today's show was from Jon Stewart. Tune in next Thursday.